Entrepreneurship is different for the information services. While we are salesmen, we are a different type of salesman. In the field, I will not be attempting to sell a product for profit, so much as I will be attempting to sell services for continued reuse, as well as selling myself as a professional and as a valuable asset worth returning to for aid. This is a challenge, especially as changing times have seen us enter an age where it seems to the average person that our profession is obsolete. Because of this, while it is still incredibly important to be able to sell the mechanical benefits of the library, a research center, a recreational place, and so on, the ability for us as information professionals to broadcast our own personal value takes a certain level of center stage in us. I'm not sure if it is a better example of advocacy or marketing, but one of my favorite and leadership style assignments was the creation of a collection development policy for a faux library in my LIS 610 course. I kept the scope of the library small as to be able to fully explore the idea of the CDP. The mission statement lays out the intended use, but it was with the philosophy I was able to properly introduce a level of advocacy to the piece. In it, I lay out the goal for the fictional library I have created, a place dedicated to providing for the entertainment needs of a fictional community through literary, film, or other methods. As I state in the policy, the fiction collection is a collection of primary interest. I advocate for informational freedom, if in a roundabout way, when I express that at reconsiderations of what books are in the collection based on patron concerns or the like, have a tedious process that will have to be gone through before anything is pulled off of the shelves. Patrons cannot simply demand something be removed and have it be made so. That stands against the principles laid out in the policy. The entrepreneurial side of this would come into play when actually working to acquire or grow the collection, but as this was strictly a thought experiment style process, I have no actual growing collection to show. If lucky, though, I hope to one day be able to do something similar to this. The collection management area of librarianship is what I find myself greatly interested in. Of course, advocacy need not be as complicated as this. All an information professional seeking to advocate for their organization needs to do is step outside and go speak with their community, get them interested. Any goal I could want to achieve for my organization can be met simply by getting the public on my side. Marketing is a touch more complex, but it all begins with budgeting. A librarian may not know how much money they'll have available to spend until they get it, but by setting reasonable goals, they can ensure they retain as much of that money as possible from year to year. This provides an indisputable benefit to the institution. After all, once they have the money, short of spending it on expenses such as building maintenance and repairs, they don't have to give it back. They can save it to pay for those previously mentioned expenses as they arise. So every penny that a library can pinch is ultimately crucial to its continued existence. And it is very important that this is done in this manner, as I have found that being able to finance the library on the budgets they are actually provided with can so often be a daunting task. This can be especially hard when it comes to trying to implement and promote new electronic resources. Powerful tools as they are, they can also be costly ones, which are more of a necessity and less of a luxury for libraries as the digital age presses on. As much as I wish it weren't the case, libraries are just as subject to the ebb and flow of the economy as anything else, and a downturn can spell hard times for every part of its extended information system, publishers and vendors, for instance. It's important, then, that libraries are always prepared for these turns of events, and always have a budget that allows them to be prepared. The closest thing to any kind of communication-driven leadership I ever truly performed of my duration in the program, though, was my analysis of a case study for my LIS 650 class, in which I was tasked with analyzing a situation and providing what I believed to be the best judgment call for it, then communicating that call back to the person in question who was requesting assistance. In it, a fellow information professional was looking for advice on how to handle an organizational catastrophe, specifically whether or not she should use volunteers. Other professionals have voiced their disapproval on the usage of volunteers instead of trained persons in the field, and while the concerns have validity, they weren't considering the whole picture. The organization which the case study focused on was noted to be having financial concerns, so opening new paid positions would have been irresponsible for them. In the paper, I communicated this to the people involved and advocated for the use of volunteers on the grounds that solutions must be built around the facts, not the feelings. I suggested that any organizational efforts that take place after the volunteers completed the duty of taking care of what can only be described as a haphazard mess of unorganized documents should be on the shoulders of the current employees, rather than the volunteer. That is to say, once the mess is cleaned up, the actual employees need to make sure it stays that way themselves. Well, a final example I have to offer is a touch out of the way of the informational sciences. It's one of the best examples of a burgeoning attempt at marketing I think I can offer. In my LAS 636 course, I was tasked with creating a website. It could be about anything, and I was feeling creative, so I decided to take a game idea I was working on and design a site around it. All images I am currently using on the site are borrowed from other sources, at least in part as some are altered in order to better represent the intent, but I have laid out a fairly concise example of what I want this site to represent. A promotional place, and eventual info hub, for this game in question. I'd like to have included more elements, but sadly I lack the technology to properly create videos that like to exemplify the elements of the gameplay, though I touch lightly upon it all the same. There are certain things I've attached to the site that will not be a featured part of its future, as I fully intend to continue to update this site as I progress on refining the game, such as the class assignments page, but everything else there will stay, and more, such as a link to what I hope to eventually be a Patreon page to gain funding for the game, will be added. This will be a major entrepreneurial undertaking for me, but I look forward to it one day becoming a reality. In summary, I've not had a lot of on-the-ground entrepreneurial experience, but I run through a number of scenarios and mental exercises that I believe will serve me well as a background to refer to when offered such a position as the ones I describe: a collection development manager, a volunteer organizer, and so on. Leadership seems like an unnerving thing to consider, as someone just coming out of this program, but I believe I have a strong grasp on the skills required to succeed in it. All of these elements come down to one thing: communication. Whether it's communicating goals through a CDP, communicating suggestions or advocacy in writing or in person, or simply communicating a desire to pique the interest of persons potentially interested in a product. Knowing that, I know how to approach these tools and make the best use out of each of them.